I want to have your babies. These were the words Hannah never thought she'd have to tell Seoul's most powerful businessman, Kang Min-jun, only to black out and wake up as his new housekeeper. Hannah thought she could keep her mortifying mistake buried in the past while maintaining professional boundaries. How wrong she was. Welcome once again, my amazing viewers. If you are watching right now, kindly tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy. Sumin's eyes sparkled with mischief as she leaned across the small table, her fourth cocktail sloshing dangerously close to the rim. You see that man over there? She gestured not so subtly toward the VIP section, where Kang Min-jun sat surrounded by suited associates, his presence commanding the entire corner of the bar. Hannah followed her friend's gaze, her own vision pleasantly fuzzy from the alcohol coursing through her system. The man in question was undeniably striking. Sharp jawline, perfectly styled dark hair, and an aura of power that seemed to radiate from him even in the dimly lit space. That's Kang Min-jun, Sumin whispered conspiratorially, though her whisper was loud enough to turn a few heads. He owns half of Gangnam. Hotels, real estate, probably this bar too. Nobody approaches him without an invitation. So? Hannah mumbled, still nursing her wounded heart from the breakup text that had shattered her world just hours ago. So, Sumin grinned wickedly, I dare you to go talk to him. Tell him... She paused for dramatic effect. Tell him you want to have his babies. Hannah snorted, nearly choking on her drink. You're insane. You're heartbroken and need to do something wild, something completely un-Hannah-like. Sumin grabbed her friend's hands. When are you ever going to get another chance like this? You're leaving for Australia in 2 weeks anyway. What's the worst that could happen? The alcohol had dissolved Hannah's usual caution, replacing it with a reckless bravado she didn't recognize. Her ex-boyfriend's words still burned in her memory. You're too boring, too predictable. Well, she'd show him predictable. Fine, Hannah heard herself say, standing up with more confidence than she felt. But if I get thrown out, you're paying for my taxi home. Sumin squealed with delight, quickly pressing Hannah's phone into her hand. Record it. I need proof this actually happened. Hannah's heart pounded as she watched Min-jun excuse himself from his table, heading toward a private corridor. Now or never. She fumbled with her phone, hitting record and slipping it into her pocket with the camera just visible. The hallway was quieter, more intimate. She saw him enter a door at the end, probably a private room for VIP clients. Every rational thought screamed at her to turn back, but the alcohol and heartbreak propelled her forward. She pushed open the door. The sight that greeted her made her breath catch. Min-jun stood with his back to her, dress, shirt draped over a nearby chair, his bare shoulders and sculpted back visible in the soft lighting. He turned, surprise flickering across his impossibly handsome features. Hannah started, her rehearsed line suddenly feeling absurd, but she'd come this far. I want to have your babies. The room tilted suddenly. Min-jun's shocked expression was the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her, and she collapsed forward into his arms. Min-jun caught her instinctively, his arms wrapping around her waist as her weight fell against his bare chest. For a moment, he stood frozen, this beautiful stranger draped unconscious in his embrace, her words still echoing in his ears. I want to have your babies. Okay, he smirked in amusement, looking down at her. He'd noticed her the moment she entered the bar. How could he not? Even in her simple dress and minimal makeup, she'd stood out. There was something genuine about her, something unguarded in the way she laughed with her friend, so different from the calculated women who usually vied for his attention. He'd watched her steal glances his way throughout the evening, assuming she recognized him like everyone else in Seoul did. But this was unprecedented. Min-jun carefully adjusted his hold, supporting her head as it lolled against his shoulder. Her face was flushed from alcohol, dark hair falling across her cheeks. Up close, she was even more striking. Delicate features, full lips slightly parted as she breathed softly against his skin. What am I supposed to do with you? He murmured, a smile tugging at his lips despite himself. He maneuvered her toward the leather sofa, intending to lay her down safely, when suddenly her eyes fluttered open. They were unfocused, glassy, but she was looking directly at him with a dreamy expression. Her phone began buzzing insistently in her pocket. Min-jun carefully retrieved it, seeing Sumin flashing on the screen. He answered, holding it to her ear. Hannah. Hannah, are you okay? Where are you? The panicked voice was tiny but audible. Fine, Hannah slurred, her hand coming up to steady the phone. So fine. He's so pretty, Sumin. Like, so pretty. Minjun felt heat creep up his neck. Nobody called him pretty, intimidating, powerful, cold. Those were his usual descriptors. I'm coming to get you. Stay where you are. "Kay," Hannah mumbled, and the call ended, but instead of closing her eyes again, Hannah's hand, the one not holding the phone, began sliding up Minjun's chest. Her fingers traced the defined lines of his muscles with an artist's curiosity, leaving trails of fire in their wake. "You work out," she observed with drunken solemnity, her touch growing bolder as it traveled across his shoulders. That's really nice. Really, really nice." Minjun caught her wrist gently, his heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with business deals or boardroom battles. "You're drunk." "Drunk?" "Enough to be honest," she countered, leaning closer until her lips were inches from his. Her eyes, though unfocused, held a surprising intensity. "You noticed me earlier. I saw you looking." He had been looking. He couldn't seem to stop. "I did," he admitted, his voice rougher than intended. Hannah smiled, a slow, satisfied smile that transformed her entire face. "Good, because you're the most beautiful man I've ever seen, and my ex-boyfriend can go straight to—" Her words cut off as her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed against him once more, this time completely unconscious. Her phone slipped from her fingers, and Minjun caught it before it hit the floor. The screen was still lit, showing a recording in progress. His thumb hovered over the stop button before he decided against it. Let her have her proof of this insane night. She'd probably need it to believe it actually happened. "Sir?" His assistant Jae-hyuk appeared at the door, drawn by the commotion. His eyes widened at the scene. His notoriously cold boss holding an unconscious woman, shirtless and looking utterly bewildered. "Her friend is coming to collect her," Minjun said, somehow managing his usual authoritative tone despite the absurdity of the situation. "Wait downstairs and escort her up. And Jae-hyuk?" "Yes, sir." "Not a word of this to anyone." As Jae-hyuk departed, Minjun carefully arranged Hannah on the sofa, draping his suit jacket over her like a blanket. He retrieved his shirt, dressing quickly, though his eyes kept returning to her sleeping form. "I want to have your babies." He'd been propositioned countless times, in countless ways, but never like this. Never with such brazen, drunken honesty that somehow felt more genuine than any calculated seduction. Hannah's head felt like it was splitting open. Sunlight stabbed through her eyelids like knives, and her mouth tasted like she'd been chewing on cotton mixed with regret. She groaned, rolling over in her bed. Wait, how had she gotten to bed? The last clear memory she had was the bar, Suman's dare, and then nothing. Complete blackness. Panic seized her as she sat up too quickly, immediately regretting it as the room spun. She was in her pajamas. Who had changed her clothes? Fragments of the night flickered at the edges of her memory. A private room, someone's arms around her, the scent of expensive cologne. Her phone. Where was her phone? She found it on her nightstand, battery nearly dead. With trembling fingers, she unlocked it and froze. There, in her recent files, was a video, 23 minutes long. "No," she whispered, pressing play with mounting horror. The video was dark, the angle awkward, clearly shot from her pocket, but the audio was crystal clear. She heard her own voice, slurred and confident in a way she'd never sounded in her entire life. "I want to have your babies." A man's voice, deep and cultured, responded with surprise. Then there was movement, shuffling sounds. Hannah fast-forwarded, unable to watch the whole thing. She caught glimpses, her own hands visible in the frame, touching someone's bare chest. Her voice again, flirtatious and bold. "You're the most beautiful man I've ever seen. Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God." She paused on a frame where the camera had shifted, catching a partial view of the man's face. Even in the poor lighting and awkward angle, she could see he was devastatingly handsome. But more importantly, who was he? Had Suman's plan actually worked? Had she really approached Kang Min-jun? She couldn't remember. The video didn't show enough to confirm his identity. Her alarm shrieked, and Hannah nearly jumped out of her skin. 7:30 a.m. She had exactly 1 hour to get across Seoul for her first day of work at the Kim estate. The hangover, the mortifying video, the gaps in her memory, it would all have to wait. She needed this job desperately, especially now that she'd probably made an enemy of one of Seoul's most powerful men. If that had been Kang Min-jun in that room, and if he ever found out who she was... Hannah pushed the thought away, stumbling toward the shower. She'd deal with last night's disaster later. Right now she had a future to salvage, even if her dignity was already in tatters. The mansion loomed before Hannah like something out of a drama she couldn't afford to watch. Modern architecture blended seamlessly with traditional Korean elements, clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a garden that probably cost more to maintain than her entire year's salary. She smoothed down her simple black uniform, took a deep breath, and rang the doorbell. An older woman with kind eyes and graying hair answered. "You must be Hannah. I'm Mrs. Choi, the head housekeeper. Right on time, that's good. Mr. Kang appreciates punctuality." Hannah's stomach dropped. "Mr. Kang?" "Yes, Kang Min-jun. He owns the estate." Mrs. Choi smiled, gesturing her inside. "Come, I'll show you around before he arrives from his morning meeting." The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of marble floors, designer furniture, and instructions about which rooms required daily attention. Hannah's mind raced. It couldn't be the same Kang Min-jun. Seoul was a city of 10 million people. There had to be other wealthy men with that name. "Ah, perfect timing," Mrs. Choi announced as footsteps echoed in the entrance hall. "Mr. Kang, this is Hannah, your new..." Hannah turned, and her world tilted on its axis. It was him. The man from the video stood in the doorway, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent for 6 months. His dark eyes found hers immediately, and that smirk, that knowing, devastating smirk, spread slowly across his face. "Hannah," he said, her name rolling off his tongue like a caress. "What a pleasant surprise. You two know each other?" Mrs. Choi looked between them, confused. "We've met," Min-jun replied smoothly, never breaking eye contact with Hannah. "Briefly, at a bar in Gangnam." Hannah's face burned. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. "Mr. Kang," she managed, bowing stiffly, "I apologize for any previous unprofessional behavior. I assure you it won't interfere with my work." His smirk widened. "I'm not worried." Mrs. Choi, sensing an awkward tension she didn't quite understand, cleared her throat. "Well, I'll let you get settled, Hannah. Your room is in the staff quarters. Mr. Kang, do you need anything before your afternoon appointments?" "No, thank you, Mrs. Choi." But his eyes remained fixed on Hannah as the older woman departed. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words and mortifying memories. "So," Min-jun said finally, slipping his hands into his pockets with infuriating casualness, "about those babies you wanted to have..." "I was drunk," Hannah pleaded. "I didn't know what I was saying. I don't even remember." "Most of that night." "I remember all of it." He took a step closer and Hannah instinctively backed up against the wall. "Every word, every touch, the way you told me I was the most beautiful man you'd ever seen." "Please," Hannah whispered, humiliation washing over her in waves. "Can we just forget it happened? I need this job, Mr. Kang. I can be professional. I'll stay out of your way, do my work, and what if I don't want you to stay out of my way?" Hannah's breath caught. The intensity in his gaze made her knees weak. She'd just escaped one relationship disaster. She couldn't afford another, especially not with her employer. "I appreciate your perspective," she said calmly, "but I need to be clear that maintaining professional boundaries is non-negotiable for me in this role, Mr. Kang. I trust we can work together with mutual respect and understanding." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. He stepped back, giving her space, though that infuriating smile remained. "As you wish, Hannah. For now..." The next few days were torture. Hannah threw herself into her work with single-minded determination, cleaning, organizing, and perfecting every task Mrs. Choi assigned. She learned Min-jun's schedule by heart, timing her duties to avoid him. Morning room service, delivered before he woke. Afternoon cleaning, done during his business meetings. She became a ghost in his house, efficient and invisible. But she felt his presence everywhere. The lingering scent of his cologne in rooms he'd just left. The way his coffee cup was never quite empty when she cleared it, as if he'd deliberately left it for her to find, still warm. The books he left open on the sofa. Poetry, she noticed with surprise, not just business journals. And sometimes she caught him watching her, a glimpse of him at his study window as she tended the garden, his reflection in a hallway mirror as she passed with fresh linens, always that same knowing look, patient and amused, as if he was playing a game she didn't fully understand. It was driving her insane. The midnight encounter happened on her 5th night. Hannah couldn't sleep, her mind replaying that video for the 1,000th time. She'd watched it once more that evening, torturing herself with her own drunken boldness, the way her hands had explored his chest, the huskiness in her voice when she'd called him beautiful. She needed water. Cold water. Maybe she could drown herself in it. The kitchen was dark except for the soft glow of the lamp lighting. Hannah filled a glass, pressing it against her forehead, when she heard footsteps behind her. "Can't sleep?" She spun around, water sloshing over the rim. Min-jun stood in the doorway wearing black silk pajama pants and a loose white t-shirt that somehow made him look even more dangerous than his business suits. His hair was slightly mussed, and Hannah hated how attractive she found him like this, unguarded, human. "I was just leaving," she said quickly, setting down the glass. "Stay." It wasn't quite a command, but it wasn't a request either. He moved into the kitchen with the confidence of a man who'd never been denied anything. "We should talk." "There's nothing to talk about, Mr. Kang." "Min-jun," he corrected, leaning against the counter opposite her. "And I disagree. You made me several promises that night." Hannah's face flamed. "I was drunk and heartbroken and honest." He took a step forward. "Alcohol doesn't create feelings, Hannah. It just removes the filter." Another step. Hannah's back hit the counter behind her. "So tell me," he continued, his voice dropping lower as he bracketed her with his arms, hands gripping the counter on either side of her hips. He wasn't touching her, but she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "When do you plan to fulfill those promises? Because I haven't forgotten a single word." Hannah's heart hammered against her ribs. This close, she could see the golden flecks in his dark eyes, the slight stubble along his jaw. She remembered the feel of his chest under her palms, and her fingers itched to touch him again. No, absolutely not. "Those promises were made by a drunk girl who no longer exists," she said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "And even if they weren't, I don't date my employers. It's a disaster waiting to happen." "I could fire you. Then I definitely wouldn't date you." Min-jun laughed, a genuine, surprised sound that transformed his entire face. "You're not afraid of me at all, are you?" "Should I be?" "Most people are. Most people probably haven't drunkenly propositioned you." Hannah ducked under his arm, putting distance between them before her resolve crumbled. "Look, Mr. Kang." "Min-jun, this can't happen. I just got out of a relationship. I'm leaving for Australia in 2 weeks anyway. And mixing business with pleasure is a recipe for disaster. So please, just let it go." He studied her for a long moment, and Hannah couldn't read the expression on his face. Finally, he nodded. "Dinner, tomorrow night. Just dinner, nothing more. Give me one evening to get to know the sober version of the woman who captivated me." "I can't." "One evening, Hannah. If you still want nothing to do with me afterward, I'll respect that. But you owe me at least that much for the entertainment that night." Hannah opened her mouth to refuse, but something in his eyes stopped her. Beneath the teasing and the confidence, she saw genuine interest, genuine hope. It reminded her of how she'd felt watching him at the bar before liquid courage had destroyed her inhibitions, drawn to him despite every logical reason not to be. "I can't," she said firmly, even as her heart protested. "I'm sorry, but the answer is no." Disappointment flickered across his features before he masked it with that familiar smirk. "All right. I respect your boundaries, Hannah, for now." He pushed off the counter, heading toward the door, then paused. "But just so you know, I'm a patient man, and something tells me you're worth waiting for." Later, lying in her narrow bed in the staff quarters, Hannah stared at the ceiling and wondered if she'd made the right choice. Her body still hummed with awareness from their encounter, her skin remembering the heat of his proximity. In his own room across the estate, Min-jun stood at his window overlooking the moonlit garden. He'd built an empire through patience, strategy, and knowing exactly when to push and when to wait. Hannah found the note before she'd even had her morning coffee. It sat on her small desk in the staff quarters, the cream-colored paper thick and expensive, the handwriting bold and confident in black ink. "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Socrates. Perhaps it's time to stop running from new beginnings." M. Her traitorous heart did a little flip. She told herself it was annoyance, not anticipation, as she tucked the note into her uniform pocket and headed downstairs to begin her duties. The flowers arrived an hour later. Delivery for Hannah, Mrs. Choi called, her voice tinged with curiosity. Hannah emerged from the laundry room to find an enormous bouquet of peonies, soft pink and white, full-bloomed and fragrant. Not roses, not orchids, but peonies. Her favorite flowers, the ones she'd mentioned exactly once to Suman over coffee 2 weeks ago. The card read simply, Day 1. Someone has an admirer, Mrs. Choi said with a knowing smile. These must have cost a fortune. Peonies aren't even in season. Hannah buried her face in the blooms, inhaling their delicate scent, even as she tried to maintain her irritation. He'd called Sumin. He'd researched. He'd imported out-of-season flowers because she'd mentioned them in passing to her best friend. It was manipulative. It was excessive. It was working. The next morning brought her favorite coffee, a honey lavender latte from a boutique cafe on the other side of Seoul, left steaming on her desk with another note. Day 2. I'm told this requires a 40-minute wait during rush hour. You're worth the wait. The day after, she found a first edition of a poetry collection she'd mentioned wanting to read someday. How he'd discovered that particular detail, she had no idea. Day 3. Chapter 47 is my favorite. I'd love to hear which one is yours. By day 4, a garment bag appeared hanging on her door. Inside was a dress that made Hannah's breath catch, midnight blue silk that shimmered like starlight, elegant and understated, with a designer label she couldn't pronounce but definitely couldn't afford. The note read, For when you change your mind about dinner. And you will. Hannah ran her fingers over the silk, torn between throwing it back at him and trying it on immediately. The confidence in his words should have annoyed her. Instead, she found herself smiling. She was in so much trouble. Each gesture was perfectly calibrated to her specific tastes, her private dreams, the small details she'd never expected anyone to notice or remember. A playlist of songs she'd hummed while cleaning appeared on a USB drive. A book of Seoul hiking trails with several routes highlighted and noted. These have the best sunrise views. A jar of her grandmother's favorite honey cookies from a bakery she'd mentioned was near her childhood home. Hannah tried to maintain her distance. Truly, she did. She continued avoiding Min-jun during working hours, kept their interactions brief and professional when they did cross paths. But she caught herself looking forward to each morning's surprise, reading his notes multiple times, sleeping with the poetry book on her nightstand. Her walls weren't just cracking, they were crumbling. You're smiling more, Mrs. Choi observed one afternoon as Hannah arranged the peonies, which were mysteriously refreshed every few days, in the main hall. It's nice to see. Hannah hadn't realized she'd been smiling. That was concerning. The knock on the mansion door came on day 7, just as Hannah was finishing the upstairs hallway. She descended the stairs to find Mrs. Choi looking uncomfortable, and her heart stopped at the sight of the man on the doorstep. Jin Woo, her ex-boyfriend, holding a bouquet of generic red roses and a heart-shaped box of chocolates, looking sheepish and hopeful. Hannah, he started the moment he saw her, please, just hear me out. She should have closed the door. Instead, some old instinct for politeness made her step outside, pulling the door partially shut behind her. What are you doing here, Jin-woo? I made a mistake. He thrust the flowers toward her. Breaking up over text was cowardly. You deserved better. You deserved everything, and I was an idiot for not seeing it. Hannah looked at the roses, the chocolates, the rehearsed apology in his eyes, and felt nothing. No anger, no longing, not even satisfaction at his regret. Just a mild sense of pity for the time she'd wasted. Jin-woo, she said gently, not taking the flowers. I appreciate the apology, but we're done. We were done before you sent that text. We both knew it. You did us both a favor by being honest. But I love you. No, you don't. You love the idea of me, the version of me that never challenged you or wanted more than you were willing to give. She smiled, surprised by how much she meant it. I've moved on. You should too. Find someone who makes you want to be better, not someone who's content to be less. Jinwoo's face fell. Is there someone else? Hannah opened her mouth to deny it, then paused. Was there? She hadn't agreed to date Min-jun, had actively rejected him, but that's none of your business anymore, she said finally. Goodbye, Jinwoo. I wish you well, I really do. She slipped back inside before he could respond, closing the door with a quiet finality that felt like the end of an entire chapter of her life. That was well handled. Hannah jumped, spinning to find Minjun standing in the doorway of his office, his expression unreadable. How much had he heard? "How long were you?" "Long enough." He stepped back into his office, and something in his tone made it not quite a request when he said, "Come here, please." Hannah followed, ready to defend her decision to handle her personal business at his doorstep, but the words died in her throat. The office had been transformed into a garden, flowers everywhere. Peonies, yes, but also orchids, roses, lilies, jasmine, blooms she couldn't even name, in every color imaginable. They covered every surface, their combined fragrance almost overwhelming. And in the center, his massive desk had been cleared and covered with boxes of chocolates, not supermarket brands, but artisanal creations with labels in French, Belgian, Swiss, Japanese. Minjun stood in the middle of this ridiculous display, hands in his pockets, trying very hard to look casual and failing miserably. Hannah burst out giggling. "Is this?" she gasped between giggles. "Is this your way of marking territory?" A flush crept up Minjun's neck. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You heard him apologize and went full flower shop meets chocolate factory." Hannah walked around the desk, running her fingers along the exotic blooms. "This is insane. This is absolutely insane." "His roses were pathetic," Minjun said defensively. "Generic grocery store arrangement, and those chocolates probably came from a convenience store." "So you imported half of Seoul's flower district and apparently raided boutique chocolate shops across 3 continents?" "4 continents, actually. The dark chocolate with Himalayan salt is from a small artisan in India." Hannah looked at him, this powerful, composed businessman who ran an empire, currently looking like a jealous teenager trying to justify his excessive reaction, and something in her chest softened dangerously. "You're jealous," she said wonderingly. "I'm not—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Fine. Yes. I heard him ask if there was someone else, and I realized that I want to be that someone else. I want you to be able to answer yes to that question." The honesty in his voice stripped away her last defenses. "This is a terrible idea," Hannah said softly, but she was moving closer to him now, drawn by something stronger than logic. "You're my employer. I'm leaving for Australia in a week. We barely know each other beyond a drunken encounter and your excessive courtship campaign. So let me know you properly." Minjun closed the distance between them, his eyes intense. "One date. Let me take you somewhere that isn't my house, where you're not my employee, where we're just 2 people trying to figure out if this insane attraction is real." And if it is real, Hannah's heart was racing. "What then?" "I'm still leaving. This has an expiration date." "Then we'll have 1 week to make the most of it. 1 week to see if maybe, just maybe, you'll find a reason to stay, or I'll find a reason to follow." The presumption should have annoyed her. Instead, it made her pulse skip. "1 date," she heard herself say, "but at work, we remain completely professional. Mrs. Choi already suspects something, and I won't compromise my job performance." "Agreed. And no more of this." She gestured at the floral explosion around them. "This is excessive even for you." "I make no promises." But he was smiling. That genuine, unguarded smile she'd glimpsed in the kitchen, and Hannah felt her last reservations melting away. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow night? 7 o'clock? Dress code? That blue dress that's been hanging in your closet all week." "How did you know I hadn't thrown it away?" "Because you tried it on." His eyes danced with amusement. The garment bag was moved. Hannah felt her face heat. "That's creepy. That's observant." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. "I pay attention, Hannah, to everything about you." As she left his office, trying to ignore her racing heart and the smile she couldn't quite suppress, Hannah heard him humming softly, one of the songs from the playlist he'd made her. The rooftop restaurant was a secret, the kind of place that didn't advertise, didn't need to, because everyone who mattered already knew about it. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides, open sky above, and a view of Seoul that stretched endlessly in every direction. Hannah stepped out of the private elevator in her blue silk dress, and Minjun forgot how to breathe. "You're staring," she said, a shy smile playing at her lips. "I'm appreciating." He offered his arm, leading her to a table set for 2 near the Edge of the rooftop. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. I wanted you to see Seoul the way I see it, beautiful, full of possibility, yours for the taking. Min-jun, Hannah laughed softly, settling into her chair. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, and we haven't even ordered yet. Wait until dessert, I have a whole speech prepared. The ease between them surprised Hannah. She'd expected first-date awkwardness, stilted conversation, the usual dance of two people trying to impress each other. Instead, they fell into conversation like old friends reuniting after years apart. He asked about her family with genuine interest, not the polite questions of someone making small talk, but real curiosity about the people who'd shaped her. My mom raised us alone after Dad passed, Hannah found herself saying, the words flowing easier than expected. She worked 3 jobs to send me and my sister to good schools. Think that's why I push myself so hard. I can't waste the sacrifices she made. Tell me about your sister. Amara? Hannah's face lit up. She's everything I'm not, confident, outgoing, pursuing medicine. She's the successful one. You studied abroad in a country where you didn't speak the language, Min-jun pointed out. You rebuilt your life after heartbreak. You work harder than anyone I've ever employed. That sounds pretty successful to me. The validation warmed something deep inside Hannah's chest. On impulse, she pulled out her phone. It's late morning there. Let me, she dialed, and her mother's face filled the screen. Hannah, baby, are you okay? I'm fine, Mama. I'm actually on a date, and She glanced at Min-jun, suddenly feeling brave. I wanted you to meet him. She turned the phone, and Min-jun leaned into frame, his business polish replaced with something warmer, more genuine. Mrs. Okonkwo, it's an honor. Hannah speaks about you with such love and respect. Her mother's eyes went wide, taking in the handsome man, the elegant setting visible in the background. Oh my. Hannah, you didn't mention that he's Korean, that he looks like he walked out of a magazine, that I'm terrified and excited and completely out of my depth. Hannah laughed. I know, Mama. It's all very sudden. They talked for just a few minutes, Min-jun asking thoughtful questions about her mother's nursing work, mentioning he'd love to meet her properly someday, before Hannah ended the call, her heart full. Thank you, she said quietly. Family means everything to me. You didn't have to. I wanted to. Min-jun reached across the table, his fingers finding hers. I want to know every part of your life, Hannah. The people you love, the places that shaped you, the dreams you're too afraid to say out loud. What about you? She turned his hand over, tracing the lines of his palm. All I know is the powerful businessman everyone whispers about. Who is Kang Min-jun when the world isn't watching? The vulnerability that crossed his face made her breath catch. Lonely, he admitted. I built an empire, but somewhere along the way I forgot to build a life. Success came at the cost of connection. People see the money, the power, the reputation. They don't see the man who eats dinner alone most nights, who can't remember the last time someone asked how his day was and actually cared about the answer. He looked out at the Seoul skyline, his jaw tight. I've had relationships, but they all wanted the same thing. The lifestyle, the status, the Instagram-worthy moments. No one wanted the 3 a.m. phone calls about failed deals, the stress that keeps me awake, the doubts I hide behind expensive suits. Min-jun. But you, he turned back to her, his eyes intense. That first night, drunk and uninhibited, you looked at me and saw something worth wanting beyond my bank account. And every day since, you've challenged me, matched my wit, refused to be impressed by things that usually impress people. You see me, Hannah. Just me. Do you know how rare that is? Hannah's throat tightened with emotion. You scare me, she confessed. This scares me, because I see you too, and what I see makes me want things I promised myself I wouldn't want again. Like what? Like forever, she whispered. Like building something real. Like believing that maybe I deserve someone who looks at me the way you do. Min-jun stood, pulling her up with him, and suddenly they were standing at the edge of the rooftop, Seoul glittering beneath them like fallen stars. One date, he said, is not going to be enough. The dates that followed were a revelation. Min-jun showed her his Seoul, the hole-in-the-wall bookshop in Insadong where the owner greeted him by name, shelves crammed with rare editions and forgotten classics. The intimate jazz club in Itaewon where they sat so close their shoulders touched, music washing. Over them in waves, a temple in the mountains at dawn where peace settled over them like morning mist. Hannah showed him her soul, the vibrant chaos of Hongdae's international cafes where she'd found comfort in familiar flavors far from home. The African market where vendors called out greetings in languages that made her homesick and grateful at once. Sunrise jogs along the Han River where the city slowly woke around them and possibility felt infinite. They learned each other. His coffee order, Americano, no sugar, extra shot. Her habit of humming while she thought, the way his eyes crinkled when he genuinely laughed, how she twisted her hair when nervous, the comfortable silences that felt as intimate as conversation. One evening, Min-jun arranged another video call with her family, this time planned, proper, with her mother and Amara both present. "So you're the man who's got my sister smiling like a fool," Amara said immediately, her medical student directness on full display. Min-jun didn't miss a beat. "I'm the man trying to deserve that smile every day." They talked for over an hour. Min-jun asked Amara about her studies, discussed healthcare systems with Hannah's mother, shared stories that made them laugh. He was charming without being performative, interested without being intrusive. After, when Hannah had said her goodbyes and disconnected, her phone rang immediately. "Mama?" "Baby." Her mother's voice was warm, knowing. "That man looks at you like you hung the moon and stars just for him." Hannah glanced across the room where Min-jun was pouring wine, unaware of the conversation. "He makes me feel like maybe I did. He's good for you. I see it in your eyes. You're glowing." "But Hannah?" "Yes? Don't be afraid of this. I know you got hurt before, but some things are worth the risk." "That man? He's worth the risk." But fear had a way of creeping in during quiet moments. It happened on a Thursday evening after a particularly challenging day at work. Hannah had scrubbed the same bathroom 3 times, unable to shake a growing sense of inadequacy. Min-jun found her on the balcony of his penthouse where they'd planned to have dinner, staring out at the city with tears streaming down her face. "Hannah," he was beside her instantly, concern etched into his features. "What's wrong?" "This," she gestured between them, her voice breaking. "Us. What are we doing, Min-jun? Look at this place. Look at your life. I clean houses for a living. I'm leaving in 2 days for a country on the other side of the world. What do we really have in common besides attraction and good conversation?" "Is that what you think?" He turned her to face him, thumbs wiping away her tears with infinite gentleness. "That this is just attraction?" "I don't know what to think." The words tumbled out. "You're brilliant and successful and you could have anyone. What if I'm not enough? What if the reality of me doesn't match whatever fantasy you've built? What if we're caught up in the romance of it all and when real life hits?" "Stop." He cupped her face in his hands. "Listen to me. I don't want someone who fits into my world. My world is lonely and cold and built on transactions. I want to build a new world with you. One where coming home means something, where success is measured in laughter and late-night conversations and the way you hum while you work. Where I'm not Min-jun the CEO, I'm just the man lucky enough to love you." Hannah's breath caught. "Love?" "Yes, love." His voice was steady, certain. "I'm in love with you, Hannah. Completely, terrifyingly in love. And I know 2 weeks isn't long enough to know someone's favorite color or how they take their eggs. But it's long enough to know that you're everything I never knew I needed. You're brave and kind, and you challenge me to be better. You see through my walls, and somehow still choose to stay. You make me laugh. You make me want to be, vulnerable. You make me believe in possibilities I'd stopped dreaming about." "Min-jun." Her voice broke on his name. "I'm not looking for perfect, Hannah. I'm looking for real. And this," he pressed her hand against his racing heart, "this is the most real thing I've ever felt." The kiss happened naturally, inevitably, like gravity finally winning. His lips were soft against hers, questioning at first, then growing more certain as she melted into him. The Seoul skyline blurred around them, stars emerging overhead, and Hannah tasted salt. Her tears or his, she couldn't tell. When they finally pulled apart, foreheads pressed together, breathing ragged, Min-jun whispered, "Don't go to Australia." "Min-jun, I know it's selfish. I know you have plans, but stay. Stay and let me prove that this is worth it, that we're worth it." Hannah looked up at him, this man who'd demolished every wall she'd built, who saw her fears and loved her anyway, and felt something shift inside her chest, something that felt like coming home. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Me too. What if we fail? What if we don't?" Hannah had stopped pretending to maintain professional distance at work. Everyone knew. Mrs. Choi smiled knowingly when Min-jun found excuses to be wherever Hannah was working. The gardener noticed how the house seemed brighter, filled with laughter that hadn't existed before. Even Jae-hyuk, Min-jun's perpetually serious assistant, had been caught grinning at his boss's obvious distraction. "You're disgusting," Suman declared over coffee one Saturday, watching Hannah check her phone for the third time in 5 minutes. "Disgustingly happy. It's nauseating. I love it." Hannah laughed, tucking her phone away. "He sent me a picture of a cat that reminded him of me." "See? Disgusting?" But it was perfect. Morning coffee delivered with stolen kisses, evenings on his balcony talking until dawn, weekends exploring the city or staying in, content. Just to exist in the same space. Hannah had stopped counting down to departure dates because she couldn't imagine leaving anymore. Then the letter arrived. The embossed envelope sat on her desk in the staff quarters, official and heavy with consequence. Hannah's hands trembled as she opened it, already knowing what it contained, but hoping somehow she was wrong. "Dear Ms. Okonkwo, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into the graduate program in international development with a full merit scholarship. Everything she'd worked for, every sacrifice her mother had made, every long night studying, every application, every dream she'd built, right there in elegant typeface, offering her the future she'd always wanted. A future that was 8,000 kilometers away from the man she loved. The days that followed were torture. Hannah went through the motions, cleaning, organizing, smiling when required, but her mind was elsewhere, caught in an impossible equation that refused to balance. Career or love, dreams or heart, future or present. She couldn't eat. Food tasted like ash. Sleep was elusive, replaced by hours of staring at the ceiling, the acceptance letter burning a hole in her nightstand drawer. Each time she looked at Min-jun, his smile, the way his eyes softened when they found her, the casual intimacy of his hand finding hers, the weight in her chest grew heavier. Min-jun noticed. Of course he noticed. "You're somewhere else," he said one evening, finding her on the balcony where they'd first confessed their love, his arms wrapped around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. "Talk to me, Hannah. Whatever it is, we face it together." The gentleness in his voice broke something inside her. "I can't," her voice cracked. "Min-jun, I can't. Hey, hey." He turned her around, concern etched deep in his features. "What's wrong?" Through tears she didn't remember starting to cry, Hannah retrieved the letter from her pocket where she'd been carrying it like a guilty secret. Her hands shook as she handed it to him. She watched his face as he read, saw the pride flash first, then understanding, then something that looked like his heart breaking in real time. When he looked up, his smile was devastating in its forced brightness. "Hannah, this is incredible. A full scholarship? This is everything you've worked for." "I know," she whispered. "When do they need an answer?" 2 weeks. He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed. "How long is the program?" 2 years. The words hung between them like a death sentence. 2 years, 730 days, an eternity measured in missed moments and empty spaces. "You have to go," Min-jun said finally, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. "What?" Hannah stepped back, stung. "How can you say that? Don't you want me to stay?" "Want you to stay?" His laugh was bitter, broken. "Hannah, I want to chain you to this balcony and never let you leave. I want to beg you to throw that letter away and choose me, choose us, choose this life we're building. But I can't do that." "Why not?" "Because I love you." The words exploded from him, raw and desperate. "I love you too much to be the reason you give up your dreams. This program, it's your future, your career, everything you've sacrificed for. If you stayed for me and regretted it, even a little, even years from now, I'd lose you anyway. At least this way." His voice broke. He turned away, gripping the balcony railing so hard his knuckles went white. "At least this way," he continued quieter now. "We fight for each other with everything we have. We don't wonder, what if? We don't let resentment poison something this beautiful. But 2 years is nothing. He turned back, cupping her face with shaking hands. 2 years is nothing compared to a lifetime of knowing I held you back. Hannah, if you stayed and gave up this opportunity, eventually you'd look at me and wonder about the life you could have had. And that would destroy me more than distance ever could. Hannah was sobbing now, pressing into his touch like she could memorize the feel of his hands on her skin. I don't want to lose you. You won't. We'll make this work. Video calls, visits when we can manage them. I'll count down every single day until you come back to me. What if you meet someone else? What if 2 years is too long and you... There will never be anyone else. His voice was fierce, certain. You're it for me, Hannah, the only one. Whether you're here or on the other side of the world, that doesn't change. They talked through the night, working through logistics and fears, making promises they both desperately wanted to keep. Min-Jun pulled up flight costs, calculated visiting schedules. Hannah showed him the program details, her voice growing stronger as she remembered why she'd wanted this in the first place. I can come visit during semester breaks, she said, curled against his chest as dawn painted the sky pink. And you could come for holidays? I'll fly out whenever you need me. Middle of the night, middle of a meeting, doesn't matter. You call, I come. 2 years, Hannah whispered against his heartbeat. 2 years, he confirmed, pressing a kiss to her hair. And then you come back to me. We'll get married, build that life we talked about, maybe even work on those babies you once promised me. She laughed through her tears, the sound watery but genuine. You're never going to let me forget that, are you? Never. His arms tightened around her. It's the best drunken proposition I've ever received. As the sun rose over Seoul, painting their future in shades of hope and heartbreak, Hannah made her decision. She would go. She would chase her dreams, build her future, become the woman she'd always meant to be. And Min-Jun would wait. Promise me, she whispered, tilting her face up to his. Promise you'll wait for me. He kissed her softly, thoroughly, like he was memorizing the taste of her. I promise. 2 years, 20 years, forever. I'm yours, Hannah. There will never be anyone else. They held each other as Seoul woke around them, both terrified of what lay ahead, but somehow knowing, that this was right. That love wasn't about holding on so tight you couldn't breathe. Sometimes love meant letting go, trusting that what's meant to be will find its way back. I love you, Hannah said, the words both a promise and a prayer. I love you too, Min-Jun replied, his voice breaking. Always, in every time zone, across every mile. Always. Hannah's final month in Seoul passed in a blur of bittersweet moments. She and Min-Jun clung to every second together, as if they could somehow stretch time itself. Weekend trips to Jeju Island, late-night conversations on his apartment balcony, promises whispered in the dark. They were building a reservoir of memories to sustain them through the drought ahead. At the airport, neither could let go. Min-Jun cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing away her tears. 2 years, he said firmly. I'll be counting every single day. Hannah tried to speak but couldn't form words past the lump in her throat. She kissed him instead, pouring everything into that final embrace before walking through the gate. She didn't look back. If she did, she knew she'd never leave. The first months were agony. They video called daily, sometimes leaving the connection open for hours while they studied or worked, needing just the presence of each other. Good morning texts, photos of mundane moments, voice notes when they missed each other's voices. It was never enough, but it was everything they had. Gradually, they found their rhythm. Scheduled call times became sacred. Then, Min-Jun surprised her at month 3, appearing at her apartment door with that familiar smirk. Hannah screamed and leaped into his arms, and that long weekend felt like coming up for air after drowning. She flew back to Seoul for her semester break, and their reunion was intense and beautiful, and reminded them why they were fighting so hard. During their separation, both of them flourished in unexpected ways. Hannah excelled in her program, publishing research that turned heads in her field. She made new friends, explored her independence, proved to herself that she could succeed on her own terms. The girl who once doubted her worth now stood confident in her accomplishments. Min-Jun expanded his business internationally, which conveniently brought him closer to Hannah's country more frequently. He also started mentoring young entrepreneurs, finding fulfillment in giving back that surprised him. He became softer, more open. Hannah's influence had cracked something open in him, and light was pouring in. But not every day was easy. They fought about missed calls and time zone confusion. There were moments of crushing loneliness, doubt that whispered in the dark, tears shed into pillows. Yet they always came back to each other, choosing their love over and over again, one difficult day at a time. The second year was easier. They'd learned the language of long-distance love, the patience, the trust, the small gestures that meant everything. Min-jun visited 4 times. Hannah came back twice. They planned her post-graduation future together, dreaming about what came next, building castles in the air and slowly, carefully, giving them foundations. As graduation approached, Min-jun had a plan, one that would change everything. Hannah walked across the stage to receive her master's degree, her heart swelling with accomplishment. She scanned the audience for her phone, ready to see her mother and sister via video call. But then she froze. They were there. Actually, there. In person. And sitting next to them, beaming with pride, was Min-jun. After the ceremony, Hannah ran to them, nearly tripping over her gown. Min-jun had flown her entire family in as a surprise, planning for months without her knowing. Her mother embraced her, crying happy tears. Her sister wouldn't stop talking about the private plane. Hannah couldn't process it all. The degree, her family, Min-jun's elaborate surprise. It was too much happiness at once. As her family celebrated nearby, Min-jun took Hannah's hand and led her to a quiet garden on campus. Cherry blossoms were blooming. He'd timed it perfectly. They sat on a bench where she used to study, her graduation gown rustling in the breeze. "I'm so proud of you," Min-jun said, taking both her hands in his. "You did it. You chased your dreams and conquered them." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "We did it. I couldn't have done this without you. You loved me enough to let me go." Min-jun smiled, then his expression turned serious. "Hannah, 2 years ago, you got drunk in a bar and told me you wanted my babies." She laughed, blushing, furiously. "Oh God, can we never mention that again?" He slid off the bench onto one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. Hannah's breath caught. "I'm completely sober," he continued, "and I'm telling you, I want everything with you. Marriage, partnership, a life built together wherever that takes us. Will you marry me?" Through happy tears, Hannah didn't even let him finish. She pulled him up and kissed him, whispering, "Yes," against his lips over and over. He slid the